After years of waiting, UFO 50 has finally been released. If you don't know, it's a collection of 50 games, all with an 8-bit style that span a variety of genres. There's a total of 11 co-op games in this collection, so let's talk about them. And I'm just going to talk about these games in order. Each game has a fictional release date. You're also able to filter the games to just show the co-op games. So let's do that. The first game is called Ninpek, and it's supposed to simulate games from 1983. It's an auto-scrolling 2D platformer, and this one definitely reminds me of an early Sega Master System game, or just an arcade platformer. In this game, you're just going to be jumping around, avoiding enemies, and throwing shurikens. This one is incredibly basic. It's not a bad game, but it's definitely not one of my favorites from the collection. It just doesn't offer a lot of creativity here. The next game on the list is called Mortol, and this one has a release date of 1984. Now this is the first co-op game that really stands out and implemented some really creative gameplay. This one is basically a platformer, but just describing it that way doesn't do it justice. You basically have a set amount of men, and you have to use their abilities to make a path to the end of the level. As soon as you run out of men, then you get a game over. This one doesn't have simultaneous 2-player co-op. You actually have to take turns, but it still requires a lot of communication and cooperation. Each man has the same abilities. He can stick into the wall for future players to jump on and get to higher ledges, or they can explode to take out enemies or blow up the environment. And you can also turn into stone, and this is usually helpful when trying to cross spikes. You can drop a stone halfway through, and this allows the next player to platform over to get across the spikes. Like I said, this game is just incredibly creative, and it's really difficult. I definitely want to go back and complete this game, but it's one of my favorites on the list. The next game on the list is called Kick Club, and it has a release date of 1984. This is basically a single-screen platformer. So think about games like Snow Bros, or the original Mario Bros, or Bubble Bobble. It would definitely fit in with those types of games. But instead of blowing bubbles or throwing snowballs, you're going to use a soccer ball to destroy the enemies. And there's only one soccer ball in each level. So you're going to have to work together, passing back and forth to clear out all the enemies. And once all the opponents are gone, then you complete the level and move on to the next. This is another one that is just pretty basic and kind of lacks creativity. I did enjoy it, but the thing is, all of these games are at least decent, and they're all playable. Just some of them aren't nearly as creative as others, and this is one of them. I don't really see myself going back to this one. Mooncat is the next game, and it had a release date of 1985. On the surface, gameplay-wise, this looks like a pretty standard platformer. But once you actually get your hands on the controller and you feel how weird this game is, it is anything but a standard platformer. First of all, the controls are completely weird. Throughout my entire playthrough of this game, I could never actually wrap my head around the controls. I was screwing it up over and over. Basically, you have to use the D-pad to move in one direction, then you use buttons to move to the other direction. And then while moving, if you push up at a certain time with another button, then you can jump. I honestly don't know how to describe this. It makes no sense, and while you're playing it, it still makes no sense. But that's what makes this game unique. If it didn't have this control scheme, it would be probably the easiest platformer ever. But the weird controls makes this game way more difficult. This is one that me and my partner were completely addicted to and played through in one sitting. And it definitely took us way longer than it should have. It gets really frustrating, and you're constantly feeling like a complete idiot to not even be able to make the most simple jumps. And then there's the visuals. I don't even know what these characters are. They kind of look like a hot dog or like a bean or with legs, or an old man face with no arms or something. I don't have any idea what is going on in this game. All I can say is it's very creative, and it's one of my favorites on the list. So if you and your partner have some patience and can work on learning these controls, it's definitely worth playing. Bushido Ball is the next game, and it had a release date of 1985. To sum this game up, it's kind of like Windjammers, but with martial art characters. You're going to do matches of 2 on 2. There's a ball that bounces between you, and you're going to use your martial arts skills to try to hit it past the opponents and score points. The gameplay is very simple, but it's definitely addicting. This one took a minute to get the hang of, but once we got it, we were able to play through the entire game. This one's definitely solid, but it doesn't really do anything to stand out. Caramel is the next game, and it had a release date of 1986. This is a pretty standard side-scrolling shoot-'em-up, and could also be classified as a cute-'em-up, as you're shooting food-based enemies, like cookies and stuff like that. I could definitely see some influence from Life Force and Twin B and even Fantasy Zone. This one's a decent shoot 'em up, but don't let the cute visuals give you the wrong idea. This game is actually really difficult. You only get a few hits and then you're dead, and you stay dead. We were not able to get too far in this game. I did enjoy what I played, but I would say that this one is more of a mid-tier game. And then we had Hotfoot, which came out in 1986. This is a game that draws some clear inspiration from the Kunio-kun sports games, specifically dodgeball. But instead of balls, you have little sandbags, I think, that you throw at your opponents. And the matches are 2 versus 2. At the start of each game, you are presented with a handful of characters. Each character has unique abilities. Some of them are able to cheat and cross the line, some of them are able to push players down, and things like that. And your selection of characters is different every single time you play. This is very similar to dodgeball. You basically just throw the bag at your opponent and then you get a point if you hit them. First team to 15 points, I think it was, wins, and then you go on to the next match. This is another one that took a while to get the hang of, but once we had a good strategy, we were able to win a few matches. I really enjoyed this game, and I think I would go back and play it again. And then we had Mortol 2, which came out in 1987. So this one is obviously a sequel to the original Mortol, and the one thing that has in common with that game is that you will take turns between players. And the objective of the game is to try to get to the exit. But what makes this one stand apart from its predecessor is that there are now different characters, and each one has different abilities. So you're gonna need to choose your characters wisely to figure out the best way to get to the end of the level. I'm not gonna lie, this one, I could not figure out. We played this for quite a while and we just ran through a number of our guys and didn't really progress at all. So if anyone knows how to properly play this game, let us know. But for that reason, it wasn't my favorite. I think the first Mortol is way better, but I definitely do want to go back to this and try to figure it out a little bit better. And also in 1987, we had Fist Hell. I'm gonna go ahead and start off by saying that this is my favorite game on the entire list. I am a bit biased because I just love beat 'em ups to begin with. Not even comparing it to other games on this list, just in general, it's a solid beat 'em up. It has a bit of a horror theme where you're gonna be fighting aliens and zombies. One thing I love, as you beat up the zombies, they start losing their limbs and their heads, and you're able to pick them up and use them as weapons. So many of the modern beat 'em ups are usually like an homage to the arcade games or 16-bit era of beat 'em ups, like Final Fight or Streets of Rage. We don't get as many that are influenced more by 8-bit beat 'em ups. So this one is definitely a breath of fresh air. This one is more similar to the NES Double Dragon or Mighty Final Fight or River City Ransom. This is another game that's really difficult. We weren't able to complete it, but we got pretty close to the end. I definitely want to go back and try this one again. We actually got a lot of beat 'em ups that came out in 2024, and this is actually one of my favorite ones. And the next game on the list is called Elfazar's Hat, and this had a release date of 1988. Now this is a top-down run-and-gun shoot-'em-up with some really cute graphics. It definitely has some Akari Warriors and Commando influence, but the game that I can most closely compare it to is Pocky and Rocky. I really love the visuals, but this also has a match 3 card game aspect to the gameplay. So as you're defeating the enemies, you're gonna pick up cards. Depending on the combination of cards you get, you'll get an extra life or a power-up. So you're gonna wanna be careful about what cards you pick up. This is another one that's definitely one of my favorites on the list. I think it just feels very polished. I love the visuals. Ultimately, this is just a really solid run and gun shooter. And the final game on the co-op list is called Seaside Drive, and this one came out in 1989. This game incorporates a number of gameplay genres. The best way I could describe it is it's kind of like a run and gun shooter, but you're in a car, and one player controls the car and the other player controls the aiming. You're able to shoot ahead of you with one button, and then you're able to shoot above you and diagonally with another button. When it comes to pure co-op gameplay, this is probably the best co-op experience on the entire collection. You really have to communicate and work together. So go ahead and talk amongst yourselves and figure out who's going to be the best driver and who's going to be the best gunman. This is another one that just has some really great visuals, and the soundtrack is just really fun and upbeat. I definitely want to go back and play this game again. This is just an all-around excellent game. So there you go. There are all 11 of the co-op games on UFO 50. What's your favorite game in this collection? And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and check out our video from last week where we talked about new and upcoming local co-op horror games. And thank you for watching.